Hello and welcome to the last and final video in this series. Now in the last couple of videos we've looked at what APIs are, how they work, and how you can understand them, and we've even looked at how you can find APIs and indeed found our translation API right here. In this last video we're going to look a little bit at what Retool is, and then we're going to go ahead and build a translation app. Now here's one I built a little bit earlier. The app's going to look like this. You're going to have a place for selecting different languages, and then of course you're going to have the ability to translate some text. I'm not going to show you it right now because we'll save that nice little surprise for the end. But first, let's talk about what Retool is and what it can do. So Retool is a platform for building internal tools. And if you're not sure what internal tools are, they're generally pieces of software or apps that are intended for use by a team or a business or a department, but generally something that is not intended for public consumption. So for example, if you want to build the next Facebook or the next Netflix, you probably do not want to look at Retool. You probably want to go and look at Adalo or Bubble or Webflow. On the other hand, if you do want to build a tool that your team can use, that maybe the operations department or the customer support department can make use of, then Retool is the platform for you. Now, this is primarily used by actual programmers and less so by non-technical people, but both can definitely use it. And so you'll notice when you have a quick glance at this platform, it's definitely got a higher learning curve than some of the other tools out there that we would call no-code tools. But the reason programmers use it is because it is so powerful. And quite often as a programmer, when you're building an internal tool, what you really want is a good enough interface. You don't need something pixel perfect that's been, had weeks spent on it by a designer, but you do need something beautiful, clean, easy to use, and modern. And if you have a look at this interface here on this demo app video, that is very much what Retool provides. And so underneath all that is a lot of functionality, a lot of data sources that are available, and overall it's just really simple and easy to use. And so as a no-coder, this is a really good platform to use for the same reasons. You can build things fast. You don't have to worry too much about design because Retool takes care of that for you. And if you want to present something to an internal team that's nice, safe and secure, then Retool has you covered straight out of the box. So when you go ahead and try Retool, so go ahead and get logged in, you'll find yourself on this screen here. Now obviously you won't have all the apps that I've got, but you will have some test apps. And if you go up here to the top right and hit create a blank app and give it a nice little name like translation app, then you'll find yourself here in the Retool IDE or Integrated Development Interface or environment. We'll just call it Retool, we'll just call it the Retool interface, but this is what it looks like. Now there's three major sections, let me explain them to you. First of all, you have the canvas here. This is kind of where you're going to put everything that you want a user to see. In other words, if you look at this demo app, everything that you can see on the screen, all of that was put in here when I built this app earlier. You'll also see it split into header and main, and similarly, if you look here, we've got the table sitting in this kind of off-white background. That's the main area. And then up the top, we have this header with the kind of white bar, and that is the header area. Now, I've kind of used it the way I've used it just for the visuals, but if you were creating a Retool app that had several pages that you could click through, then the header would always stay consistent, but the main part would change. And so you'd maybe expect, rather than having actual parts of your interface up here, you would probably just have, a nice little logo or something like that, or a navigation bar up here. So that's that. Now, in terms of actually getting elements into the canvas, you'll find them all here on the components sidebar or menu. And so there's some stuff here that you'll probably recognize, like the ability to drag a table in, which is exactly what I've done here. But you've also got the ability to add in buttons, images. If you scroll down, you even get into some really interesting specific inputs. So you can add the ability to give a rating, a number, a field that can only put in a currency. If I scroll further, you can control dates. You can add the ability to do a digital signature, to record audio, to scan barcodes, so on, so forth. Lots of stuff you can do here. And what tends to happen is when you drag something in, so let me click this table. First of all, you're going to get all these little grid lines that appear, and you can see the blue is what the table is going to be, but the grid lines just let me make this nice and sharp. And so I can just let go. And immediately when that's put in there, you're going to have this bar over here change. So it switches from insert over to inspect. And inspect just gives you lots of different things that you can change in relation to the table. So for example, if I wanted to change the columns where it says name with a lowercase letter, I can click there and I can take that column and I can change that to an uppercase and I can close that and boom, it's changed here on the table. Now by default you have this kind of dummy data. We're going to delete that soon and put our own data in there, but it just gives you an idea of how this works. And then lastly, we have what we call the resource panel or the query builder. Now let me explain those two phrases. First of all, a resource refers to some sort of place where you're going to receive information or data. So let's say you had a database full of languages, then that could be a resource. On the other hand, you know, a resource can also be an API, because again, that's somewhere that you can go to get data. So if, like us, you have an API with language data available, then that is also a resource. So a resource, and then on the other hand, you have this word query. Query just means a request or a question. So if you want to, you know, go and get all the language data from a database, then technically you are querying that database. And similarly, although we prefer the terminology of requesting an API or making an API call, if we go to our Lecto translation API, and we ask for a list of languages, then we have just queried that API. So all together as one word, you know, a resource query is you going and asking an API or a database for some data, and indeed, you know, the part where you kind of put in all the information to make that API call, well, that's called a query builder. So where it says resource here, let's click this and change it to something a little bit more familiar. You'll see this a little bit here, REST query. And if you remember from the first video, REST is simply the common language that we use to communicate with APIs. And so when we're saying REST query, really what we're saying is API call or API request. And when I load that, hopefully you see some words that are familiar to you. So, you know, get, well, we're used to that. We know post, we know patch, we know delete. You also have the word parameters, which we've seen before, headers, we have a place for a URL. And so hopefully some of this becomes a little bit familiar. Now, it can still be pretty daunting. So let's go ahead and put some examples in here and see if we can't get this to make a little bit of sense. Now, quick glance at the previous app I made earlier. We have a table with the language and the language code. And as we know from the second video, we can get that here in RapidAPI by doing our list languages call. And so let's see how you would actually make that API call here in Retool. So we know we want to make a GET request. We've already got that set, but it's immediately asking us for a URL. Now, all API documentation is going to contain the URL. The best place to find it here in RapidAPI is simply in the code snippet. So we can see the method set to GET. We've handled that, but we can see the URL. And if I just go ahead and copy and paste that, and please make sure not to include the little quotation marks. You don't want them, they will break this. But simply take the text and paste it in here, and boom, we've got our URL. Now, there's a couple other things we have to add, which are our headers. Now, you could copy them from here, but again, it is actually easier to copy these from the code. RapidAPI's interface just makes it a little bit easier. So where we've got a header key, we're going to put in X RapidAPI host. That is the key or the name of the header. And then we're going to go and copy this other bit. And again, you'll notice I'm avoiding the quotation marks or the speech marks, whatever you want to call them, the apostrophes indeed. And I'm just going to paste that in there exactly like that. If you do have any issues running this, it might be that you've not copied and pasted that properly, so do keep an eye out for extra characters. And then next we're going to take our API key. Remember, your API key is going to look a little bit different than mine, and remember, don't ever show it to anyone, not even your firstborn, because once someone has that, they can completely control the API on your behalf. So we just put that in there. So you should have something that looks a little bit like this. You've got the URL, you've got it set to GET, you've got the headers, and you've got them all set up. Let's see what happens when we hit save and run. The moment of truth. So, if you've done the same on your own screen, you have now just ran your first ever API call. I know you hit one earlier in the second video here with test endpoint, but that's not the same. You know, this time you really made it happen. And so you can see I'm just highlighting the middle here where the bar meets the canvas, just so I can drag it up. But you'll hopefully see something that looks a little bit familiar, because if we go back and we look at the results of the instead of wanting to hit test endpoint. If we go back and look at the language results that we saw in the second video, you'll see it looked a little bit like this. There was an array, within that there was then another data object with the display name, language code, etc. Well, here we have exactly the same thing, and because RapidAPI's interface isn't on top of it and saying kind of 4 items, so on and so forth, it actually makes it a little bit easier to understand. So we have our square bracket, we have an array, and then we have each different language. So that's pretty good. We can now go ahead and use that data. Let's just give it a name we understand. I'm just going to change query 1 by clicking that and change it to get all languages. And then what we're going to do, so let me just give us a little bit of space, take that back down. Let's close the query results. Now, I've went ahead here and selected my table, and so on the right hand side, we have this little data field. I'm going to select everything in there and delete it. And so it will say no rows found. And let me show you why. One of the most powerful things that you can do in Retool is create data in one place and then have it pull through to another place. So in any text field, you can do this. Hit two of the curly brackets on your keyboard. They should be somewhere in the top right hand corner, they certainly are here on my MacBook. But if you hit those little curly brackets, you open two of them, you'll get this little menu that pops up. Now there's a lot of stuff in here that's pretty confusing, pretty techy looking, but what this is letting you do is access all data that your Retool app has available to it. And right at the top, it's going to show you everything that you've created as a query. And so we have this little bit that says get all languages.data. And what that's really telling you in plain English is get all the data from the get all languages query that you made to the API, or get all data from that API call. And so if we go ahead and select that, now sometimes it won't let you select it, so what to do is just like mouse over it and then hit tab. If we do that, you're going to see all this kind of, JSON techie speak show up in the row. So this is where it gets pretty powerful. If you just keep hitting the little dot, so if you keep putting another dot in, or a full stop, or a period, whatever you want to call it, then it's going to keep showing you more information. So I can hit languages, and suddenly it's now pulling that through properly and showing us our array or our list in table form. So I can now see all of that data. And this is where we can start to customize things. So let's just quickly have a look at that. So if I hit the preview button, this is going to bring our app live. So this is what we've just built. We've actually built an interface that you can share with people. You can hit that share button, you can share it to people, they can let them use it, and they'll be able to pull through data that you've actually got from an API. I mean, that's a pretty incredible feat of tech on its own. 10 years ago, this kind of thing would take you a day or two just to get working. And so we've kind of got this set up now, but we can go ahead and edit that, as I say. So if you remember, I sort of pointed out that when you actually select a component or drag a component in, you then have all these options down the right hand side. Now we already went ahead and changed the name previously. Let's do that again. So where we've got language code, let's make it a little bit more professional, uppercase letters and whatnot. So we'll write language code there. Where we've got display name, we'll write language name. You could do some other stuff like turn these around so the language name comes first, etc. But I'll let you play around with that yourself. And then what we're going to do is we don't really need these little ticks that say support source, etc. So if you mouse over them, this little eyeball appears. We just do that. That'll hide them. And boom, you've got a table of languages. The other thing that you can do, so if you remember when I went in that little example there, the table kind of split into 19 different pages that I had to tab through. Well, now I can hit that, set it to scroll, and if I go back and preview the app, now we can scroll all 91 results as well. And Retool already gives you some built-in stuff that's pretty cool, like downloading the data as a CSV, adding a filter, reloading that data. So all of this is built in out the box. But of course, if you're doing something, for example, has secure data and you don't want users to be able to download it, for example, then as you scroll through here, you'll see you can start to turn these things off. So I can turn off the download button, for example, and there you go, it's gone. I'll leave it on for now though. So, already a good time to give yourself a little pat on the back because you've just created a working piece of software. But let's go ahead and make it a little bit more complex. So now we're going to do the actual language translation. I'm going to take this text input element or component, and I'm going to drag it right over here. You can put it anywhere, we'll just put it there so it's nice and neat. And immediately again we've got these little bits and pieces that you can change. Now the first thing I'm going to do is change the name of this field. This is what Retool refers to it as, but your users will never ever see it. It's just for you, me and Retool to know what we're talking about. And I'm going to change that to text_to_translate. So this is going to be the text that we actually want to translate. And so, let's go ahead and change our label. Now you'll see what it says label at the left. We can change that by just typing in here. So we can say text to translate, boom, done. And then we've got enter value. Now I'm just going to put a default value in there of hello, and that's all. You could change that placeholder if you wanted to, but entirely up to you. Now you'll see there's lots of other stuff you can change here, like position of text and yada yada. I'll leave that as something for you to play around with, but let's keep adding to our interface. So we're going to have the text to translate, but we actually have to have somewhere as well to show what the translated text is. So I'm going to put this up here, and you'll see there's kind of some complicated stuff in here that might kind of throw you off. And so we're going to delete all that, but pay attention to these two little stars you see. Let me delete that, blank screen. And what I'm going to write in here is translated text. Now that will come up in normal text there, but if I add the two asterisks or stars just after it and just before it, it's going to make it bold. Now this is a thing called Markdown. If you Google Markdown, you'll find much better guides than I can give you on it, but Markdown essentially lets you format text without having to have Microsoft Office style bold button, italic button, so on and so forth. So check it out, there's a lot you can do with it. You can make headings and whatnot. So we're going to have the translated text show up there. Now, here's something else that I think we'll do, just so it looks good. So I'm just moving that down first of all. And, oh, sorry, I'm not clicking that properly. That's my bad. There we go. So I'll just move that out of the way. But the other thing that I'll do is I'm going to put another little bit of text in here. And I'm going to show you, first of all, just the power of Retool's data query. So again, we've got this here. Let's delete it, and I'm just going to leave the little emoji in there, kind of like it. And I'm going to type in selected language, and again I'm going to put a little below on, but I'm going to put the little asterisk, and that will make it bold. And then after that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this show up whichever language is selected here. So I'm going to press my double curly brackets again, and this time instead of hitting get all languages, I'm going to hit table1.selectedRow.data. So let's just quickly evaluate what that means. So this is table 1, which you can see when I highlight over it. The selected row is whichever row the current user who is ever using this at any point in time, it's whatever row they're selecting. So right now Africans is selected, which you can tell by the blue background, but we can chop and change that, and I'll show you in a second. But it's going to, whatever selected row is, it's going to grab the data from it. And so if I hit that, and then again, let me press that period because I want to specify the data. And again, I can choose from everything that's in there. So I'm going to hit display name. And there we go. We've got Africans. Now, of course, we've written language name in the table, but underneath the hood, we know that it's using the display name, even though we've changed it here. So we've got that. And if I just hit preview, I'll show you how that works. So if I hit Albanian, it will reflect that, Arabic, Armenian, so on and so forth. Cool. So the last thing left for us to do is go back to Edit App and actually make this translate text, actually carry out its real function. And now you've seen we've set that up here. But we're going to do two things. So first of all, we're going to add the post request that we have to make to do that. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to hit New. I'm going to hit Resource Query. And again, we've got it set to REST query, but this time we're going to use the translate texts. So let's go ahead and set that up. First of all, we're going to have to set this to a post. And you'll immediately see when I click that the interface changes a little bit. We now have this body part. So we're going to fill our information in here. We're going to put our URL in, we're going to put our headers in, and we're going to put our body in. But one of the things that you can do here is, here we've just got this one bit of text, but quite often when you work with a post API, let's see if it maybe does it here. No, it doesn't. You will have different boxes the same way you've got headers, and so you'll just have the parameters that you want to put in. You can simply, in the same way that you do the headers, you can simply put in a parameters like text, and you can say hello, so on and so forth. You can just put those in there. We'll come back to that in just a little second. Let's get our data put in first. So just in the same way that we did the get all languages query, we're going to do this translate text. We're just going to copy the URL. Now again, we've already set our method or our action type to post, so let's just copy the URL. Again, taking care not to include the quotation marks. And then in terms of our headers, we've actually got a new one here. This one is content type. And this just tells the API that you are going to send some JSON through with it. Now, there are some different types. I mean, if you wanted to send images, for example, there's a specific type for that. Again, any API you use in the future, the API documentation will point out exactly what you need to have in there. But let's just go through, copy all of our headers. Again, it can be a little bit tedious, but hey, at least you're not having to spend 6 months learning the program, so Now, again, your API key will be a little bit different. I'll just copy mine in there. Now, here's a little space or time saver for you, I should say. So we could go ahead and copy in the text date and the to date and the from date and copy it all in here bit by bit. But actually, if you click JSON and if you change that to raw, then you're going to get something that looks exactly the same as this. You've got that little text box. So let me go ahead and copy everything that's under this request body. You'll recognize that again from the previous video. Let me go ahead and copy that, and when it says all at one here, I'm going to click that, I'm going to paste it all in, and you'll immediately see we have got the same data. So we're going to go ahead and change this. Now, pay careful attention to what I delete here, because what we want to do is, rather than have this default text of just try it mate, we want to pull out the text from here. So we'll go ahead and delete what are you waiting for and just try it mate. That's a very, very British phrase. I presume the authors of this API is British. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to pop a little quotation mark in there because, again, we want to write a piece of text in there. But then here's the clever bit. Rather than write in, hello or something, I wanted to pull the information from a text to translate. And so I'm going to hit my double brackets, my curly brackets, and you'll see I've got text to translate value. Now, value just means whatever's been typed in by a user. So I'm going to click that. And then what I'm going to do is, on this next one, I'm going to delete the hi. Now, by the way, yes, you can always hit the period, but for this one, you don't want to do that. You just want to leave it as value because you've already got the information that you want. But yeah, here when it hits 2, I'm then going to change that as well because we want to select, which language we actually want to translate the word hello or whatever word it may be into. And so that's whichever language is selected in the table. And so just as we did before, we're going to do table.selectedRow.data. Now this time we don't immediately have the data we want, so we're going to hit the stop, the period or the stop dot again. But instead of display name like we did up here, we're going to select language code. And that, of course, is because this API, right here, it's not writing English, it's writing EN, or there it didn't, it wrote HI or AF or whatever. And if you highlight over that, you can see exactly what data it's pulling through. If I stop moving my mouse. So you'll see it's pulling through AF from there. And you get a similar thing with the value for hello. So if you're ever not sure if you should be pressing the period again and looking for more data, you can just come out of it, highlight over it, and if you've got the data you want, great, and if you don't, then keep going. So we're going to leave the EN. Of course, you could add another box here and or even another table actually, and let the user specify which language they'd like to translate from, but we'll leave that as English for now just to keep things simple. And so if I again hit save, hit run, then with any luck we should see our translation come through, and there you go. So we've translated that from Afrikaans. Now I'm not 100% sure if that's the correct translation, but since I don't speak Afrikaans, I'm going to assume that it is, and we'll verify that for ourselves in just a second. So we've created that. Let's rename that to translate_text. And then same way that we did here, we're going to go ahead, let me just move that up and make it nice and equal. We're going to go ahead and just add some dynamic data. So in the value again, let's just press space and get away from our markdown. We're going to press open the curly brackets, and you'll see something new has popped up here, translate text.data. So we're going to click that. Now, this is a little bit more complicated. So remember that when we run this, so let me go ahead and just hit test endpoint, and you'll see what I mean. When we run this, we actually have quite a complicated little nest. So, we've got our translations array, then we've got a certain translation within that, which is the first item in the list. Then under that, we then have this other array called translated. So keep that in mind as I go through this. So I'm going to hit the dot, I'm going to hit translations. Now I'm going to hit the dot again, and I'm going to pick item 0, which is the first item in our array. Now I could just leave it there, but if I did that, I'm going to get this error. And that's because, again, we're actually not in the right place yet. I've only got to here. I've only got to this little bit, this array. I haven't yet picked which translation I'd like. Now remember, this API supports multiple translations all at once, which is why we're having to go into the list of them. But there you go, I can hit translated, and I can hit 0, and with any luck, there you go, you'll see it pops up right at the top. So let's go ahead and hit preview and just double check everything works. So I've come in, I'm going to pick a language. Let's pick Scots Gaelic, and you'll see it's highlighted there. Now you have one problem. How do we actually make it translate? Let me go ahead and show you how to do that. So there's one important concept left to learn. Now I'm going to move this text out of the way, and the reason I'm going to do it is I just want it down here. In fact, yeah, let's just put it above. Oh dear, there we go. And the reason I want to do that is we need to add in a button, because quite often you'll see buttons in applications when something needs to be done, and we need a big button that says translate text. So let me explain how this works. One last concept you need to know. We have this concept here called event handlers. And an event handler is basically saying when something happens to this button, when there's some sort of event, then do something else. And you might be wondering, why don't we just call it click? Well, the reason is every item on this canvas or this page can have multiple events that happen to it. Imagine a door. A door can be opened, a door can be closed, but a door can also be slammed shut. A door can also be kicked open. All these different ways that you can interact with a door. That is what an event would be. So each of those different things, like slamming a door, opening a door, closing a door, locking a door, those would all be different events if we were talking about a door. Of course, we are talking about a button, so when I click add, you'll see click appears. Now, really simply here, it's easy to get kind of carried away with this menu, because when you click a button, so many different things can happen. You can trigger a query, i.e. you can trigger an API call, which is what we're going to do, but you can also, open a URL, show a notification, copy data to a clipboard, or make confetti come down over the screen. So lots of different things that you can do. I'll let you play around with that, but we're just going to select trigger query, which is what we have by default, and then it's going to let us pick our query. So it's saying when the user clicks a button, we're going to trigger a query, and the query that we're going to trigger is not get all languages, but actually translate text. So every time you click that blue button, this is going to run this little translate text API call. It's going to send whatever text you made. Now again, as I mentioned in the last video, please remember, obviously Lecto API does have pricing set up. So your first 300 queries are totally free, but after that it will cost you some cents or dollars depending on how many times you click it. So don't put this button here and then rapidly click it 300 times, because it'll start charging your card. So there we go, we've set that up. Let's go ahead now and see if we can make the full thing work. So we've got a little translation in there. I'm going to go and change it, as I did previously, to Scots Gaelic. Now I don't know why I'm doing that, because despite being from Scotland, I don't know any Gaelic. So that could be the right translation, but I don't know for sure. Now with that said, I do know a little bit of Spanish, as I poorly demonstrated on the last video. So let's see how it translates to Spanish. It should be hola, there it is, it works perfect. And of course you can put anything you like in there. You could say, I want potatoes, because I'm hungry. And if you hit that, quiero patatas, which of course, in my poor Spanish accent, is the Spanish term for I want potatoes. And so there you have it. Just like that, we have built a full translation app. We've got this table which is pulling in API data. We've got this button which is doing API translations. And so, of course, there are a lot more parts of Retool left to learn. But as you can see, by just blocking out some of the kind of technical parts and focusing on the bits that we know how to use, you can build some pretty interesting stuff. And as I said earlier in the video, if you do want to take this a little bit further, I recommend putting another table in here and essentially giving it the ability to choose which language you translate from. And that, if you give that a little go, it's not too hard, but it will give you a little bit more of an idea of how the API works and let you kind of work that out for yourself. But hopefully this has been helpful. If you do have any questions, let me know. I am niall@nocode.tech, or of course you can ask the Retool team as well. If you've enjoyed this, please give us a thumbs up and a wee subscribe, and hopefully we'll get some more videos out to you soon. Thanks very much for watching. My name is Niall Frater, and I'll see you again next time.